What's up, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, and the overall markets. I'm going to break down why the market is selling off the way it is, which is causing more and more potential for downside going into the end of the week. I'm going to break down some key levels to watch for what's happening involving the US and Iran, what's going on with China, and what's happening with our yields that's causing the stock market to sell off. Just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I'm saying as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you sign up for Moomoo and deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $2,000, you're guaranteed 25 in total. And deposit $5,000, you're guaranteed 60 free stocks. The offer ends on June 3rd, in just 2 weeks from now. You also qualify for an 8.1% APY on uninvested cash, so check out my offer down below. Anyways, now let's talk about what's happening with the market. So, as far as the market was going, I did talk about this scenario in my video yesterday about how we were expecting some kind of pullback move very, very soon, if not as soon as today, and that's what ended up happening. The first thing you'll notice is that this chart was making higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, higher lows. And then once we hit this top at 596, we saw SPY get a rejection there. We did try to rebound today. I mentioned that we had to break and hold 592.5 to have some hope for bulls. If we did not hold that, I was expecting us to start dipping lower, and my target was 585. We actually went a little bit below that, right? And now we're looking for a move down to about this 580 area, aligning with the 50 EMA over here. Then we'll see if we end up breaking through that or not. If we do, we will be continuing to falls. But overall, this is a change in structure. Now the market is breaking structure right here, which is a good sign for the bears. And this will likely continue as time goes on as this move is gaining some momentum. When you look at the daily time frame on SPY, you will see that we got a very bearish looking daily candlestick. We got this wick right here and a rejection. And then you could quite clearly see we have not only a negative cross in the PPO right here that's coming. We were very, very overbought, and now we're seeing this divergence playing out. We had a triple bearish divergence that was developing, which typically would lead us to more downside. And as a result, that's what ended up panning out so far. So you'll notice we have this gap to fill. As SPY returns to this like 578 to 580 area, we have to try to hold that as gap support. If we don't hold around 578, I do expect us to dip to about 572 and then eventually fill that gap to about 566. So there is a risk of us dipping all the way down to the lower 570s, if not 566, if this move continues to fall. So keep that in mind. Also, we saw a lot more volume today. There's high volume selling, and we saw a lot of aggressive selling. So the question is, what's going on? Why is the market doing this? Let's go over the reasons and what's happening around the world, and then I'll break down exactly what's going on with the charts in just a couple of minutes. And I'll talk about some key levels and my predictions moving forward. But remember, the whole market's down. The QQQ also got a big rejection, although not as hard as SPY did reject to some extent. We got a massive dump on the IWM, Aapl, Tesla. The entire market came into the red. So what's going on? The first thing I want to mention is that we have a triple bearish divergence, right? This is on the RSI right over here. RSI was trending downwards for the last couple of weeks as the market was pushing, which signals a top was basically forming, which caused the market to reject, and that's why we lost structure. So the first thing was technical analysis. That's the reason why I made the video yesterday that I was expecting some kind of pullback move, as we had some very, very strong bearish signals. So that's the first factor. The second thing is that the whole market is coming down amidst a lot of news that's going on. So the market is dictated by algorithms, okay? The algorithms are what move the way the market moves, and then they also are responsible for when we start to see these market-wide sell-offs. So it's not just, a SPY selling off. We're seeing Tesla getting dragged into this. We're seeing Nvda, we're seeing Aapl, big tech are dumping. The only big tech stock that was green was Google, as it has its own news, but besides that, everything else was in the red. The second reason why the market was dumping is because of our yields. So the 30-year bond yield is now above 5%. That's the second time this week, and one of the highest levels we've seen in a very, very long time. This basically tells us that the US government debt is now getting at a higher rate as interest rates are going up, and this is making things more expensive for US government debt, more expensive for US households, and the list goes on. So that is, once again, very important for what's going on with these borrowing rates in the US. Once again, leading to criticism for Jerome Powell, because we have President Trump saying that we need to see a cut as soon as possible. He wants the US to see cuts. He wants Jerome Powell to cut. They call him Too Late Powell. And he's not cutting yet or giving us the signal yet, despite the fact that we're seeing European countries and China doing that. They're cutting, but the US is still yet to do that amidst uncertainty about these tariffs. I'm going to talk about the tariffs in just a couple of minutes. Another reason why the US actually saw some more tensions and more selling is because of what's going on with China. So what's basically happening is the US warned that using Huawei's, and I may be saying that wrong and I apologize about that, but that company basically is known for producing semiconductors. They have their own chips, right? So the US is warning that using their chips could be a violation of export controls, saying that the design and production of those chips relied a lot on US processes and equipment. And then Washington modified the statement by saying that it was merely alerting the industry of the risks, and then they got rid of the reference that it would be, anywhere around the world triggering sanctions. So initially we saw some negative news about this causing tensions to rise with China. Then what happened was on Monday, Beijing accused Washington of undermining the consensus reached at the high level talks between China and the US. And then today, the Chinese Ministry of Commerce threatened to impose legal consequences of any organization or individual that implements or insists or assists in the implementation of US measures. So basically, there's a lot of tensions between the US and China. Things are very tense right now involving these semiconductors. And as a result of that, that also contributing to more negative headlines about how the truce is ending between the US and China. There's going to be a long trade war, and that caused even more tensions, at least for the markets. Now, when it comes to President Trump, he didn't really say too much today. He was very busy meeting up with South Africa's president, but he did say something a couple of days ago. President Trump did mention that the US is getting very close to securing a nuclear deal with Iran. That is some big news that he's been saying as they're negotiating for a long-term peace deal. When saying that, there was some more news that came out, however, that Iran's top diplomat is saying that Tehran will never stop enriching uranium, and they're reinforcing the Islamic Republic's hardline ahead of the new round of indirect talks with the US. That's very important news, despite the fact that they are still trying to continue these talks and these negotiations with their deal. So that's some big news that came out. And as a result of this tension, Israel, one thing I have to say is that Israel and Iran have a very, very long history, and I'm not going to go over every, detail in the news. You guys could do your own research for that. Just know I don't go over every single detail because there's very limited time. But now there's headlines saying that Israel may be getting ready to strike Iran's nuclear facilities due to the long history between each of the countries. And this is also causing a lot of panic amongst investors and a lot of people out there because things are very tense right now. So there's a lot of uncertainty about the tariffs. There's a lot of talk about tensions with China. There's now tensions between Israel and Iran and the US and Iran as well, as we're seeing nuclear negotiations going on. It's a mess right now around the world. There's a lot of stuff going on. We're seeing yields exploding, right? Jerome Powell's not giving us the signal to cut rates yet amidst the uncertainty because of the tariffs. And then, technicals are just seeing a very negative reaction to all this news. There's a lot of stuff going on, especially the news involving the Chinese chips, which many US companies could use. If it becomes an export regulation or violation, that would not be the best of news as well. So that's part of why we're seeing this affecting the semiconductor industry and then many other stocks. Now, when it comes to other pieces of news, keep in mind that tomorrow is going to be Thursday, May 22nd, 2025. At 9:45 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have the S&P Global Composites Manufacturing and Services PMI reports. So look for volatility then. Then we basically have some manufacturing data at 11 a.m. and then some bill auctions at 11:30. That's going to be very important for how things are going to continue. The fear and greed index is currently at greed. It's making up the majority of sentiment. Momentum's at extreme fear right now, and we're going to be watching to see what else happens. The put to call option ratio is becoming more neutral because we're seeing more puts being bought as the shorts are returning. We saw Wall Street buy tens of billions of dollars worth of shorts, at least over the last couple of days. And then we're also seeing the VIX climbing as it has an inverse head and shoulders setup. So overall, the market is remaining more bearish as we're seeing, more news about what's going on. The last thing I want to talk about is this news, which was not too good for the markets either. Tomorrow we have some very, very quiet earnings in some retail, such as like Ross. But today we had Target announce their earnings, and they did not do well, guys. It was very bad. Okay, in a nutshell, their EPS was weak, $1.30 below expectations of $1.60. Revenue and net sales were very weak, down 2.8%. Their guidance is down quite a bit. their guidance actually came down. They cut their guidance now for their EPS for the fiscal 2025, and they're expecting their prices to go up because of the tariffs. So, prices are going up for Target, their sales are declining, their overall numbers don't look good, and their guidance got cut. Bad news for Target, and that is once again causing more fears about the tariffs. So, what do I see for SPY from this point on? We're just going to focus on the charts and nothing else. I know all the news I talk about is sometimes just noise. I completely understand that for the people that just want to focus on the charts, but I believe it's very important to at least have an idea of the news. And now that we got that all out of the way, we're going to now focus more on the technical aspect of things because that's also a big factor in driving the sell-off. So what's going on? Okay, you could argue this kind of resembles the head and shoulders. You have like a left shoulder here, a head and then a right shoulder, and obviously SPY is looking very, very weak right now with high volume selling on the 4-hour time frame. Once again on the daily, very bearish looking daily candlestick. If we don't hold 578, we're looking for a dump to fill this gap all the way down to 566. So let's talk about my prediction. So I'm going to go to, I'm going to actually switch over to the 4-hour chart. I think that's going to be a little bit better because we're now seeing a big surge in volatility and the moves are getting bigger again. Instead of being very tight, we're now breaking out. So here's what's going on. If you want to be a bull, you want to see SPY get back above this green line right here. This is going to be our 20 EMA. If we get back above that, we could be looking for an attempt to rebound and to see a nice move right back up. That's going to be the more bullish case, although it's very, very unlikely. The bearish case is going to be this. If we're bearish, you want to see us just cut past 580 and fail there. If we don't hold that, I'm looking for like 578 and 575 as our target for us to just dump straight down just like that. Well, the thing is, we do have a nice support at that 580 area. You guys can see that at least historically. So I think what's going to happen is we touch 580, then we might see a small attempt to consolidate like this, and then we might just continue to fall for 575 or so. I anticipate that's what's going to most likely happen with more downside. And then we'll have to see if 578 to 575 holds. If not, we could be dumping to fill the gap down to the 560s. But I do anticipate that we hit 580. Maybe we rebound a little bit off of that because that's where the 50 EMA happens to be. And then we don't see a massive bounce. It might just be some consolidation, unless we get back above like 585 to bounce, which I'm not too confident about that. I think we just dip more and consolidate. And then we could be dipping all the way down towards the 578 area, if not as low as 575 for more downside. We're still looking more bearish, so keep that in mind. If we somehow get back above like 585, another scenario is we kind of come down, maybe get a bigger bounce first, consolidate, and then we start dipping. Like that's what I'm basically seeing. Whether we see a small bounce or a big one all depends on these different factors, but either way, I think the move is going to look like this for us to continue to dip to 578 to 575. Whether we get a small bounce or not, it doesn't matter. I'd still anticipate more downside. I hope that's as clear as possible. The QQQ is looking very weak because we got a big rejection, a bearish engulfing candle. And when you look at this, we're very, very weak right now, right? So what you want to see is if you want to be a bull, let's just say we get good news, some kind of deal, whatever. You want to get back above 517 to rebound, okay? If you get back above 517, we're going to be looking for an attempt for 520. That's when we could get back up to normal levels. If you're bearish, you want to see us fail at 515 and continue to fall towards 508. If we don't hold 508, we're going to be dumping all the way down to the lower 500s. So keep that level in mind. I believe what's going to happen is we're kind of curling on the 50 EMA towards that 508 area. So I wouldn't be surprised if the triple Q does something like this where we kind of rebound a bit, we consolidate, then we might be falling to 508. I think there's a good chance we come to this imbalance over here, and then we'll see if we get some kind of rebound off 508 before continuing to fall. But I think that we consolidate and start dumping to 508 as the most likely possibility, looking at the new technicals in the setup we're seeing on the QQQ. I also say this because when you look at the MACD, we're looking kind of weak right here. We're getting a rejection. The daily candlestick is looking relatively weak as we're coming down to this 508 area. We have a gap to fill down there. And then just in case, okay, if we don't hold this 503 to 500 area, I could see us dumping to the 590s to fill this bigger gap if we continue to fall. But of course, I would like to see some confirmation first to turn more bearish. I just think that we kind of pop and start dipping back down towards like this 508 area first before we see more downside. But I do expect us to test that tomorrow. On the IWM, I do anticipate more downside. Although it is possible it opens up around like 204 or so to hit this trend line, I think that we continue to fill this gap all the way down to about 201 to 200. So look for a test right there, which is where these EMAs are going to be. 201 to 200, we'll see if we bounce or not before we continue to fall. So just keep that in mind as time goes on. For ES, we're looking relatively weak here. Now, if ES fails at 57.75, we're looking for a dip to fill this gap towards 56.80. And if you want to be bullish, you want to see us get back above 59.50. Now, the daily is showing some weakness, and when you look at the 4-hour time frame, we're also showing some weakness simultaneously. So the first thing I want to mention is that we have a a triple bearish divergence on ES, and we're below our 50 EMA. If we can't get back above this yellow line right here, this is going to continue to fall, okay? So be very, very careful. If you want to be a bull, you need to get back above at least 5,900. I'd say like 5,920 would be better to try to bounce. If not, we're going to likely continue to fall. I believe what's going to happen is that we're going to see some consolidation, then eventually a dip to the low 5,800 area right over here. And we'll have to see if we bounce off that or not. If we don't, we're going to continue to fall. But I do think that we might be looking for 5,800. If we don't hold 5,800, there's also that gap to fill all the way down towards 56.80. So we still favor downside, at least nonetheless, to at least 5,800 or below. On NQ, we're barely holding our 50 EMA at 21,100. If we get above 21,300, we're looking for a bounce. If we can't hold that, we're looking for a dip down to about 21,000 flat. If we can't hold 21,000, I do see us dipping down to fill this imbalance around 20,800. So be careful. So I anticipate a move like this, a test of 21,000. We'll see if we bounce. If not, we do continue to dip to 20,800. So please keep that in mind. Bitcoin is still bullish despite the market selling off very hard. Despite the fact that we had a bearish divergence, it's still technically developing. There's no sign of rejection on Bitcoin. It still remains very elevated after some big news came out. So we're still looking like we have a nice accumulation, and then we could be continuing to push. I believe President Trump has a big announcement coming out involving crypto, so that could also affect things. But this might be looking for 110,000, so Bitcoin is outperforming the market, looking pretty good. Still looks bullish. Tesla's looking relatively weak. We need to reclaim at least 333 to have any hope for bulls, like just at least some hope. If we reclaim 333, we're looking for 340. If we can't get back above 333 or at least hold it for the next 1 to 2 days, we're going to be testing 330. If that does not hold, I think we jump to 325 to 322, which is where this 50 EMA happens to be. So I anticipate some downside off this big rejection all the way down to the 320s. For Nvda, we have a bearish divergence rejection. We got 1, 2, 3 rejections, and also this chip news is not good for them. We want to see this get back above at least 132.8 to rebound up here. If we can't reclaim 132.8, I do think this continues to dip to about 129. And we got to hold that 129.5 to 130 area. We got to hold that, or else this dumps towards 127 to 125 for a much bigger dip. Also, keep in mind that Nvidia is a little bit overextended because we're overbought. And then we have a lot of gaps below. The daily looks relatively weak. There's a gap to fill over here around 129. And then if that fails us, there's also a big gap over here around 123. So we have 125 and then 123 as our supports as there's some downside risk. For Aapl, we're looking kind of weak right here. We need to reclaim at least 205 to rebound. If we can't do that, we have a gap to fill all the way down towards 199. So keep that in mind. Also on the 4-hour time frame, we're rejecting on Aapl, so I do expect more downside. This will drag the market a bit lower, might consolidate and then start dipping all the way down to at least 198 or below. So I do see us dipping a few more points, anticipate some downside. We'll see how it ends up reacting from there. Netflix tried to bounce. We did expect a test of 1200. I said to watch to see if we reject off that because we have a big bearish divergence that's developing, and we got a rejection so far. So I anticipate that we're going to be testing 1182 tomorrow. I think we test 1182. We have to see if that holds. If it holds, we consolidate. If it doesn't hold, we could be dipping to 1150. So be prepared for a small dip on Netflix. MSTR got a big rejection as well. MicroStrategy is kind of weak here. We're barely holding 401. If it doesn't hold, we could be dipping all the way down towards 393. So keep that in mind. Celsius is looking kind of weak here. We're going to see if 37.36 holds. If not, we could be dipping all the way down to 36, if not 35.3. So be prepared for more downside for the low 36s. For Supermicro, we have a bearish divergence and we're rejecting right here. We have to get back above 43 to bounce. If not, we're looking for 40.05. If not, the 37 area. So be prepared for that just to be safe. We have previous resistance becoming support at 37.5. That's going to be a key level. I think we test 40, and if it doesn't hold, I do expect 37.5, but watch for confirmation. There is downside potential nonetheless. Palantir is looking weak. Big rejection, exactly as you predicted. We need to get back above 122 to rebound. If not, I easily see this dipping towards this 117.5 to 115 area for more downside potential. For Rivian, we have this support at 16.02. We'll see if that holds. If not, we could be dipping all the way down towards 15.8 to 15.5. So I anticipate 16.02, and we'll see if you rebound before continuing to fall to the 15s. For SoFi, we're making lower highs, so we're getting this big rejection. So we're watching to see if we can hold above 12.8. If it doesn't hold, we could be dipping all the way down towards 12.5. So I anticipate downside on SoFi nonetheless. On AMD, we're making lower highs right here. We have to see if we can hold back above 113. If that holds, it's going to be a good sign. If it doesn't, we're going to be looking for a risk to dip towards that 110 area. For ARM, we're looking weak here. We have a double top. We need to get back above at least 130 to rebound. If not, we could be looking for a move back down to 127.8, if not 125. So keep that in mind. Palantir is making lower highs here. Not a good sign. We need to get back above at least 72. If not, I do see a test of our 50 EMA at 70.74. That's coming. For Coinbase, we're barely holding 257, so it's actually pretty weak compared to Bitcoin. We got to hold 257 to continue to consolidate like this. We are in a consolidation phase, but if we don't hold 257.5, I expect us to dip towards 250. So be careful with Coinbase. There's some downside potential. Amazon's looking weak. We keep rejection on Amazon. We need to hold 200.5. If it doesn't hold, we easily dip to 196 towards the 200 EMA. Obviously, we have this gap fill as well around 193. So 196 to 193 is going to be our target if we can't hold 200. Be prepared just to be safe. There is downside potential. Meta has an inverse cup and handle like structure, but we're still holding support around 625. I do think our 50 EMA is going to reach that tomorrow. So we might be testing 625, and we'll see if we bounce off that or not. If we don't bounce off 625, then expect us to dip to at least 610. Google is very strong. I think we had some bullish news that came out. They mentioned that they launched a new AI-based search engine, which is very, very big news for them. That's why they're outperforming the market still. We're making higher highs and higher lows. However, it depends on if we could hold 170, because this is where we have this resistance. If 170 holds, we could bounce for 172 plus. If we don't hold 170, we might be dipping. I do see a risk of us dipping to 167, but we'll see just to be safe, as they have lots of good news. And then for Microsoft, we got to hold 450. If we don't hold 450, we're going to be dipping to 448. So make sure you're prepared for that just to be safe. With that being said, I'm going to skip over just a couple more of these. We have DJT going down to 24.08 most likely. The VIX has an inverse head and shoulders, also a break out of its wedge. Finally, it's been a while, but this is what I see coming. There's like a left shoulder on the VIX, a head, then a right shoulder forming an inverse head and shoulders. This would launch us up to fill this gap towards 22, suggesting there's more downside potential in the market. So I do expect more downside for SPY, the QQQ, and the others because the VIX is pumping. The 10-year is very high right now, so is the 30-year yield, so keep that in mind. And then we also have the dollar starting to bounce, might be looking for 100.06. So what's my view? I think the market's looking bearish. Watch for a test of 580 on SPY. We'll see if we get some kind of rebound off that or not. But even if we do get a small rebound, it might just be very temporary before we continue to fall for basically 578 to 575 for more downside. So with that being said, I expect more downside. I think the market's looking weak here. We did call this move since yesterday. I was expecting the downside, and I do think we're going to see more bearish continuation as of right now. But watch your levels just to be safe, and I'll keep you guys updated on the news. Once again, guys, for those who want me to talk more about the news, about specific things, I'm not here to give you guys every specific detail. There's a lot more that happens. I just tried to give you guys a brief summary, and I just wanted to give you guys enough for you to know about what's going on. But don't forget to do your own research about Israel and Iran or anything else if you guys want more information. I'm here to be very unbiased and just to give you guys a brief update about what's going on. Thank you for listening. Have a good rest of your day, and I'll be back very, very soon with another upload heading into tomorrow. I'll see you guys tomorrow before market open. Until then, have a good one, and peace out.